What is going on, everyone? Today we're going to be talking about Book of Shadows, Blair Witch 2. Here we go. Book of Shadows, Blair Witch 2, starring Jeffrey Donovan. Alright, so Book of Shadows, Blair Witch 2 was the sequel to the Blair Witch Project. It came out 10 months after the first movie. Immediately got a lot of hate for not being a true sequel to the Blair Witch. The confusing mess that it became because of producers and things like this. I'm going to tell you, I think it's a very misunderstood movie because I actually really like this movie. I think it's very misunderstood in the sense that a lot of people were expecting a direct sequel to the Blair Witch Project and kind of continuing that lore, whereas this acknowledges that the Blair Witch Project is a movie, okay, like just a movie, and what that movie did to cause mass hysteria amongst people with, you know, everybody believing that Blair Witch was real and things like this. It's like a commentary on that. And quite frankly, I think it was well ahead of its time. Maybe it was before its time and that's why people didn't quite, you know, get on board with it. It could be, you know, some of the acting is not that great, which is true. Some of the acting does get a little goofy, but for the most part, I very much like this movie, and I'm going to tell you why. The movie starts out with Jeff Donovan. If you watched Burn Notice on USA Network, you know who he is. This is like one of his first major films, I do believe. But it starts out with him. We see that he spent some time in the mental institution. Okay, he has spent some time there. But then he's released, and then he's out, and he's opening like a Blair Witch store, and he's making stick men and everything else to sell them. And, you know, making profit off of this whole thing. So then he puts together a tour called the Blair Witch Hunt, which he then recruits people that want to go on this tour. And those people are Steven, Tristan, Kim, Erica. They all come along with him. They think that he's done this before based on how it's worded on his little website that he made. But it turns out it's the inaugural tour. Picks them all up. They head off into the Black Hills of Maryland. They're going to go visit the site of Rustin Parr's house, you know, the foundation of the house where Rustin Parr supposedly, lived. And they set up camp there. And they notice some things that are strange, like a big tree growing up out of the middle of the house that is a really big and old tree. So it had to have been there for a long time, and it had to have been going up straight up through the house based on what we're seeing there. So they think that's strange. And then at night, they're partying, getting really drunk and really high, and we see another tour group out that comes across them, and they get into a little fight over what's going on and who gets the foundation and whatnot. Meanwhile, they're filming all this. Jeff has a bunch of cameras for everybody to use and everything like that. Then they all pass out the next morning. They wake up, and all this shredded paper is flying everywhere. Because you see, Tristan and Steven were researching things, and Steven is a skeptic. Tristan's more of a believer in like what the Blair Witch is, if it's real or not. And they were kind of writing a book about it. All the work, all the papers and everything else were shredded to bits and pieces, just flying through the air. They're very confused about this, of course. Things from there just start to go all kinds of crazy haywire. At some point, Tristan, who is pregnant, ends up having a miscarriage, unfortunately, and they have to race her to the hospital and get that taken care of. Meanwhile, in the hospital, she starts to see things. She sees a little girl. We assume it's Eileen Trakel that they've discussed earlier in the movie, who was drowned or something like that by the Blair Witch. And everybody else starts seeing weird things. They start getting weird rashes and stuff on their bodies. Yeah, all this weird stuff is happening. Now, I want to point out that in this movie, when you watch this movie on DVD, specifically the DVD, with the director's commentary, he pretty much lays out for you that the movie you're watching is not what he wanted to put out, okay? The producers got a hold of it. This is a lot like Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers, where the producers got a hold of it and they just completely messed the whole movie up with everything they wanted to do to it, to change it and whatnot. So very much a similar situation there, because when we're watching this movie, we see like these intercut scenes of gore and like people killing. We don't know who's killing, but we see these cuts of, you know, people killing people and whatnot. Don't know who it is. Then we see other intercut shots of like Jeff and Steven and all them in police interrogations, and they're being interrogated, but we don't know why. None of that was supposed to happen throughout the movie. The gore scenes and stuff weren't supposed to happen at all. And then the whole intercutting the interrogations throughout the movie was not supposed to happen at all. Those interrogations were supposed to happen at the very end of the movie, and you weren't supposed to know any of that until the end of the movie. So when you watch the DVD with the director's commentary, he pretty much lays out exactly how he meant for the movie to play and how much it was changed and where it was changed. He even talks about music cues that he wanted to use instead of the ones they used. Talking about Frank Sinatra's Witchcraft at the beginning instead of Marilyn Manson at the beginning in the title scene. Well, I want to point out that there is actually a fan cut of the movie that kind of re-puts together the movie in the way the director meant and intended. You know, and then there's those spots where you're like, well, how did they cut out the like little flashes of gore and stuff? Where clearly there's still dialogue being said, so they needed to keep that in there. What they did was kind of cut in little graphics and stuff that are not related to the gore scenes or anything, just kind of weird Blair Witchy graphics to kind of fill that space, and it actually works very well. And it's all cut to make the interrogations happen at the end of the movie. And if you really want to see this movie the way it was meant to be seen, there is a fan cut out there. I'm not going to link it or anything because I don't want to have any YouTube trouble. But there is a fan cut out there. Just look it up. Book of Shadows, Blair Witch 2 fan cut. There's recent ones up to like a year ago, even less than that. So they're pretty recent. And they're very, very well done. You know, you don't have to worry about, oh, is it crappy quality? Nope. DVD, video quality for sure. Easily. Maybe if not better than that. So I recommend you go look for that and then watch the movie. Or else, if you're going to watch the movie on like a digital streaming or DVD or whatever, now you know the way it was meant to be intended and you can kind of watch it with that in mind. Either way, the movie does show us this, and it doesn't say what happened, so you're still kind of left in the dark, but the way it's cut together, it's all mishmash and everything else, so it does confuse people, which I can understand that. But as it goes on, things just get weirder and weirder. Everybody starts acting weirder and weirder. They're looking at the tapes because they found the tapes that were recording that night when they blacked out. They didn't know what happened with, you know, how they woke up and the shredded paper was everywhere. Well, there's tapes, there's footage of it because they were recording the whole time. They find the tapes, but they don't see anything on the tapes. And they're searching through all the tapes, and Jeff and Kim and all them are sitting down, they're searching through all the tapes. And Jeff's obsessed with coffee.
Hey, see if we need more coffee? Coffee.
Can't argue with them, I am too. Hey, you know, it is what it is. So they're sitting there looking through all the tapes trying to find some kind of evidence of something that happened. So far, at that point, they aren't finding anything. They start having weird hallucinations, like Steven and Erica have this weird kind of hallucination with each other where they think they're doing this and that to each other, yet they're still sitting across the table from each other and they never actually touched. Kim goes out because she's, you know, just irritated and wants to get out of there. So she takes Jeff's van, goes to get beer, and has a weird interaction with people in the store there. Some punk little bullies outside of the store as well. There's an incident with the lady at the register. We don't really see much other than you know, she argues with her and leaves. Then she gets in the van, she drives away, she sees little kids in the road, we assume are the victims of rust and par, and then she crashes the van. Gets out of the van don't look too bad, just a little ding in the fender, right? Gets back in, drives back to the place that they're at, Jeff's place, the warehouse. He has this big warehouse that he stays in that he bought for $1. Okay, so after all that, meanwhile, Tristan is back there and she's just getting more and more delirious. She's obsessed with talking about, you know, the Blair Witch, Ellie Kedward, whatever you want to call it. And Steven keeps trying to calm her down and get her to, you know, start to try to get back to reality. Not working too well. Erica has, you know, pretty much begun to freak out with the markings and stuff that are showing up on all of them and the weird things that are happening. Erica is a Wiccan, so she's into that whole witchcraft scene. Either way, she's terrified. And then she ends up missing, and nobody can find her. And then, of course, they start accusing each other that they're why she's missing, or so-and-so killed her, or this and that. They start accusing each other, getting very violent about it. Ultimately, nobody knows what happened. She's just missing. Then, as they're looking through the footage does start to appear where they realize, you know, Erica was dancing around the tree, completely nude, and she sees this. Now, this is before Erica disappeared, obviously. Erica sees this. It's part of what starts her to freak out about everything. And ironically enough, the tree that she's dancing around is the one that was growing up through the foundation they were talking about. However, in the video that they're watching, it's a very tiny little tree. Very tiny, tiny little tree. Not this massive tree like you saw when they were there. So looking at it through the video lens, we're seeing that it's actually a tiny little tree. And early in the movie, Jeff says, and he directly says it, film lies, video doesn't. Okay? So that's what he says. Video doesn't lie, film does. He directly says this, and it is important for what we are doing here in this movie. Because ultimately, after they find out, they actually are the ones that destroyed their own cameras. They all, got naked and they're partying and having sex and everything else. And then Tristan, who's acting like she's a witch, acting like she's the Blair Witch almost, gives them all weapons, and they tear off into the woods, into the night. You don't see what happens. In the standard theatrical cut, we do see that those scenes of the gore we were seeing intercut throughout the film is actually them killing the other group of tourists that were there. In the director's version, you don't even know that. You're not even privy to that, okay? It's just implied, which I think is so much more effective. But anyway, they see them do this, and they see them run off, and they're like completely baffled at what they just saw. At this point, Erica's missing. Tristan's down there watching the footage with them. However, she has her back turned, kind of facing into the corner, kind of so to speak, or whatever, right? She's not in a corner, but she's turned backwards, not looking at the footage. And they're like, oh, they figured she was leading them because of the way she's acting in the video. She's acting very much like the leader and the witch, and she's leading them to do this, right? So they assume, that's what she was doing. They argue with her about it. And she starts to turn very, cynical and saying like, you're all going to die and this and that. That's very strange. It eventually comes down to she wraps a rope around her neck and she's taunting them and teasing them until eventually she's knocked off the ledge and basically hangs herself. But it looks like she taunted and tortured them to get them to knock her off the ledge, okay? Then it all comes ahead, and the sheriff, who's been a real, thorn in the side of Jeff this whole time, both in the theatrical cut and the fan cut that I'm talking about, you do see Jeff in the mental institution, like intercut shots of him still, like, in there. And then we also see, like, in certain publicity materials on this movie, and also at the end of this movie, I do believe, you see like news articles where it says like 17-year-old abducts child, and that was Jeff, and then like, this was a while back or whatever. He's older now in this movie. So that's why initially he was there. But you see those intercut back and forth. Anyway, the sheriff, who's been a thorn in his side this whole time, ends up, they find the bodies of the tourists and things like that. They immediately, they go to him and they pick him up and the other people that are with him, and then they go to the police station, and that's where we see the interrogations actually take place. And they're denying everything. They're trying to explain what happened, something evil in the woods. The sheriff's saying, oh yeah, so I found blood in the van. He thinks it's from the tourist. Jeff's like, no, Tristan had a miscarriage. So they're arguing about this, but then the police play the actual tapes, the videotapes that they had, and it shows that all the stuff that happened where Tristan was in the woods and they got knives and they ran off. It shows the stuff where Jeff actually killed Erica because he's holding her dead body and he puts it in the closet, something that we never saw before. And we realize he actually killed her. We also realized that Kim, when she was out at the store and she had a little interaction with the person at the cash register, she killed her too. She killed her. And they're in disbelief that they're seeing this. And then Steven is shown killing Tristan, and then she wasn't being maniacal and cynical. She was begging for her life, and they were being very, forward and mean, and so he throws her off the edge, fucking witch. Like very, very much he was the one being cynical, completely different than what we saw. And he's completely blown away that, that's like that. And he's saying the video, that somebody messed with that tape or whatever. And what it ultimately boils down to is the commentary, this whole commentary here is about mass hysteria created by not knowing what's real and what's not real and what's fiction, okay? Because the Blair Witch Project did blur those lines. And there was that kind of mass hysteria when the movie came out. And so we're seeing a group of people that get together, and the mass hysteria that's, building amongst them, it creates delusions and things like that, and a false reality that they fall into, and they fully believe the lies that they're telling themselves. That's basically what this is about. And then when they see the video footage back, they realize what really happened, and yeah, they're pretty much done for after that. So, like I said, this movie is ahead of its time. Was ahead of its time, but fits right in to these modern times, because we see what happens, with the mass hysteria and group delusion and everything else like that has gone on in recent times, and it very much fits. It fits. And I like this movie. I like this movie because I do understand this movie, and I think it's a very misunderstood movie. If you still don't like this movie, that's fine, I understand. They did have Blair Witch 2 in 2016, a direct sequel to the Blair Witch Project, which was, pretty decent. We're going to review that too. But as far as Book of Shadows Blair Witch 2, it has problems. Some of the acting is kind of weird and hokey, but I'm still going to give it 3 out of 5 knives. That's right, 3 out of 5 knives. So I still very much like this movie, and yeah, that's pretty much all I got to say about that. Hopefully my explanation there kind of helped you understand a little more, and check out and look for that fan cut, because that's the way to watch it. That's the most effective way to watch this movie. So yeah, there you go. With that said, I will catch you all down the road. When darkness falls, you will enter a new dimension in terror.